Thank you for joining us for this case study on Fellowship Bible Church. We had an interesting experience a number of years ago, this group working through this project, and thought it was a very interesting story and worthy of sharing with other people. So our panel here today is comprised of Gary Brandenburg. He's the lead pastor at Fellowship Bible Church. Darla Baird, she at the time was the church administrator. Had another career doing other things. George Clark, who did all of the AVL design, and myself, I was the architect, the design architect, along with Tip Housrat, who's in the crowd with Omniplan. And there are a number of you who we know, so be kind with your questions and don't heckle us too badly. So a little bit about the church. It's in Dallas, Texas. It's non-denominational. The project completed in 2006. The project size was 130,000 square feet, and the budget was $13 million, and I'll let Darla explain how that broke out. What made it interesting is that it was an adaptive reuse of an existing movie theater, and you'll see as we get into this the complexity of the project, but how it was very unique and appropriate for this church. And in 2008, WFX awarded it a Solomon Award. So a little bit about the history. I'm going to kind of throw that to Gary and Darla, and you guys can talk a little bit about who you are and the history behind this, where you were previously, and what motivated you to move to the new site.
I'll start. Fellowship Bible Church was part of a movement that came out of Dallas Seminary. A man by the name of Gene Getz, who was teaching at Dallas Seminary and had an idea in the 60s of how the church should change, and so they launched a church in Dallas, and it went very well. And then within from 1973 to 77, they launched 6 more. They just, instead of getting bigger in one location, started sending out scouting parties and starting in different places. We were the one that was assigned to the Park Cities area of Dallas. So that is Highland Park, University Park, and it's a new church had not been built there in some time, and they were old first churches, kind of a first church mentality in that area. And so that was start. Now there's a movement of Fellowship Bible churches are all over the place. Even though there's no formal affiliation, there's at least, as near as we can tell, 500 or more Fellowship Bible churches. Fellowship Bible Church Little Rock, Fellowship Bible Church Colorado Springs, all tracing their roots back to that original movement. And so our particular church was originally called Fellowship Bible Church of the Park Cities, and now it's changed and we just call it Fellowship Dallas. But that's a little bit of the background. Darla can tell you about the buildings because I've only been here 7 years, so she can tell you about the building process before that.
When I came into the picture, it was back in '92, and the church was on a small acreage right across from North Park Mall in a high-end neighborhood of Dallas where we've been planted. We were in 22,000 square feet, had a worship center that would seat about 650. We totally had outgrown it. Parking was a fiasco. And so at that time we were beginning to look for something in the area. We didn't really want to go north like a lot of churches were going because we had been planted in that neighborhood and really committed to staying, but finding land and building was really difficult. So at the time, we ended up finding an office building that had a complex of 3 buildings, had 2 two-story buildings and 1 5-story. And that was back during the real estate debacle, and so we got it from the FDIC, had foreclosed on it. We bought it out of that and renovated that facility, but it was not an ideal facility for the church. We were on 3 acres. The 5-story building we ended up renting the upper floors to other mission organizations and things. And we knew that long-term, that 3 acres really wasn't going to be enough of a site for who we were and how we wanted to grow, but finding something else was going to be difficult. And actually, the way we came about, that was the site I was talking about there. The biggest asset to that facility was that it had a beautiful courtyard and a stream running through the courtyard. And it made for a real attractive feature from that respect. But when we found the site that we moved into, we really weren't looking for another home, but knew that eventually we would. I just happened to go to the movies at this theater down the road, and was standing in the lobby of this movie theater. And it's really kind of a unique situation because it was built in 1989 by United Artists. They had eight movie screens on the second floor, and on the first floor it was retail. It was originally designed to be restaurants and retail shopping, small mall, almost the way you see the malls going today, where they're putting theaters on the second level. But back then, that was a real novel concept. That project did not work well for them for a number of reasons. Some sound issues that when they put in the surround sound was not making the retail work. But as I was standing there one day looking at buying my ticket, I looked around and thought, oh my gosh, this is the way we build churches today. Because we were planted as a contemporary church, and so none of our buildings had ever looked very churchy. They had not looked like traditional churches. They were meant to look like more like office buildings or concepts that would not be, they'd be very attractive to unchurched people. We were real seeker sensitive at that time. And when I looked around and I saw those 40-foot corridors in this church, in this theater building, I thought, that's the way we gather today. We don't funnel people off to a little fellowship hall to gather. They also had a large restaurant in this facility that would be a fabulous fellowship hall. And then I could see making those theaters, combining 2 or 3 of them into a large worship center, and then having the others be large adult classrooms or youth rooms and things like that. And so at that point, we thought, well, the theater was going down, the first floor was vacant, had no tenants at all. And so we thought we would pursue the possibility of trying to buy the site. Well, it took us 5 years, and I won't go through the long story of all the things that we went through. But they told us no, and we thought, well, the reason he's got this stone picture up here is because I'm kind of one of these people that when I have it in my mind, I don't take no for an answer very well. So I thought, well, Lord, I can't make United Artists sell, but I can at least pray if you want us to have this property. And so I started going over in the mornings and spending some quiet time there and praying. And what I would do is I was going through Joshua at the time and was reading about, how Joshua crossed the river Jordan, and the Lord told him to pick up the stones and to place a monument there to show what God had done. And so I just started putting these little bitty rocks in this little bitty corner of the parking lot, and I did that for about 9 months. And then I came back one day from a trip, and I think the street sweeper had swept them away or whatever. But that was part of where we started on that. And it was in, what year did you design the new facility for the Meadow site? That was about 2001 or two. So we gave it up. We decided to give it up. We've got to build. We've got to have a larger facility. He designed right here. He had designed this to be on the site of the old building, and we were 11 months into a fundraising campaign. We were in the 11th hour, the very last of it, and we got a call from United Artists and said, by chance, are y'all still interested in purchasing this property? And I thought, Lord, what are you doing? After all this time, we've been through this whole process, and so we put the brakes on this project, and went and explained the whole long story to the church, because really we hadn't told the whole church the whole story because we never had a facility to go to. And we already had Omniplan involved. They saw the project and they said, by all means, this can work. We can make this conversion. It was a really obvious conversion, but they took it to a level far beyond what I had ever imagined. That's for sure.
That's great. I love that story. Yeah, as Darla said, the project was set up because it was already an assembly use, so we didn't have to go through a zoning process and having it rezoned, and there was plenty of parking because it was a movie theater, so there weren't issues with how much parking you could have, and it happened to be right next to a light rail line, so you had mass transit available if you wanted it, and
parking garage. Yeah,
parking garage, and enough site area that for future expansion. So even though you were tripling the size of or more. Yeah.
The building that was actually sitting there on that 9 acres, when they built it in 1989, they spent $25 million to build that site, and we purchased it for $7 million.
And sold the old building for 6.3, I think it was.
And so then we turned around and put about this 13 million he mentions here, we put about 9 of it into the construction, and the other 3 to 4 million was in FF&E and architecture fees and things like that. But it ended up
And
being,
audio.
huh? Oh,
Audio.
and audio, yes. Audio had a big play, big part in it. But it continued.
As it should, right? No, I'm just kidding.
And it ended up being as Scott mentioned, it has won a number of awards and things because of the design that they came up with on the project.
Yeah, I mean, there's some very interesting, well, we'll get into it, so we're only
To give some of you who may not know that much about construction costs, even the parking, I was telling them today, the parking garage alone, at that time, they were estimating it cost about $10,000 per parking space to build. There were 450 spots in that parking garage, so that would have made the parking garage alone was worth $4.5 million, and we bought the entire 110,000 square foot building and the 9 acres for the $7 million.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think it also benefited a property that was going downhill.
Yeah.
You know, it would have sat there blighted and empty for a long time, and so the church coming in found a new use for it.
What we knew when we were looking at that property, it wasn't going to be long because it had gone from a couple nice stores and an anchor tenant or a sports bar that had been owned by a Dallas Cowboy, and then it goes down to like Radio Shack, and then once it gets to laser tag, you know the end is near. So that's kind of where it was.
It was at the laser tag level, for sure. Oh, they had even gone out.
Yeah.
I also thought that, you know, that the idea of your mission for outreach and restoration and, you know, and equipping suited that building as well. The idea that you went into a neighborhood that could have benefited from your facility because the neighborhood was a very transitional neighborhood, a lot of immigrant residents and people who were coming to Dallas area who needed some assistance. And so
It was a key question for me to come and ask when I was interviewing what they plan to do, that because I said they can't do what they're trying to do in those facilities. And they said, are you saying you won't come in the old facility? And they said, are you saying you won't come if we don't build? I said, I'm not saying that because I don't know what the land is, you know, I don't know anything about Dallas, but I know that you can't do what you're trying to do there. And I said, if you were to sell these facilities, where would you go? And I thought sure they would say north because, you know, a lot of churches in Dallas went north. And they said, we feel like we're called to stay right here. And that was music to my ears because that's what I was excited about, because on one side of us is the wealthiest part of this city. On the other, I-75 or Central Expressway, on one side, you see in the slide, one side of Central Expressway is Highland Park, University Park, wealthiest part of the city. On the other side of 75, our property is just on the other side, is an area called Vickery Meadow. It's 50,000, it's the densest area of Dallas. 50,000 residents, 5 square miles, 9,000 refugees. And my feeling was, let's be a bridge. And let's take those who have the most resources, but many of whom want to help and want to serve, they just don't know how. And those who have the least resources, and see if we can be a bridge. And it turned out, we found out when we did the demo, there was a bridge. And so it's a very prominent part of our facility now, because that's part of the story of being a bridge from one side to the other.
So here's a view of the site. So here's Central Expressway. There's a Power shopping center right here with a Best Buy and a Office Max and all that. Here's Park Lane, which connects to North Park Mall, if you're familiar with Dallas, and as Gary was describing, a more affluent neighborhood. So that kind of corner right there is that central part of that. And then the church property is kind of tucked behind all of this retail. And so from a development standpoint, it doesn't have any of the frontage. Probably had a great deal to do with United Artists not succeeding there. But as a destination property for church, it works very well. So this is the existing building right here. This is the parking garage, and then this is a surface parking lot. And so the extent of the property is here. And then there's a tiny little easement that runs along this property line that takes you out to Central Expressway so that the property could be platted. You'd have to have a certain amount of frontage on the street. So it is landlocked, and it's also access locked. And so the idea was to utilize this existing building.
So lousy location, we tell people, they say it's hard to find your church. We say, well, we thank God for that. And they say, why? I say, because if it was easy to find, it'd still be retail. So that was one of the ways I think we got it. And once you, as you know with churches, once you've been there, you know how to get back.
So this is a shot of the existing building. It's a 2-level property. The black glass bay here is kind of the feature of this. Here's the old theater marquee. The lower level was retail, so some of it faced out, a lot of it faced into that common concourse. And so the theater was up on top, so therefore the big, large, you can even see the ghost of the old theater logo. And then on the interior, this is the kind of the main intersection of the 2 hallways. It's kind of T's. These are the escalators that would take you up to the theater. This is the box office, and then the various retailers faced this common concourse. And then this is just another shot of what the other concourse looked like that would tee into it. So it was very kind of, from a retail standpoint, we do a lot of retail. It isn't very exciting or inviting, or it's almost like an office building idea about retail, real generic.
But I would say, Scott, it was exciting to me because churches are notorious for underbuilding, and because we have limited dollars. And what I found in many churches, at least in the past, it's not so much anymore, but what we give up when we have to limit the size of the building, we give up common space. Because a lot of people will just say, oh, we don't need that common space. We need Sunday school classes or something. And this thing, the common space in this place was phenomenal because it was just built for that. So it's worked out beautifully.
Yeah, as I said, from a retail standpoint, that's where all the energy happens in a mall or in a public space, is in that common area in between all of the buildings. And so that was the exciting thing, as Darla had originally alluded to. And then as you got upstairs, this is where the escalators came up. This was the upper floor that had you can see a concession in the middle of the photo there, and then these led into each of the various theaters. And so we brainstormed what this was going to be about, and you guys had some definite ideas about what you didn't want it to be, and definite ideas about what you wanted it to be. And this was kind of back when Starbucks was blowing and going, and so one of the ideas was, we like the Starbucks feel. We want it to be very comfortable, and we want people to feel very welcome and that they could come here and hang out. And just like Starbucks is the third place for many people, we'd love for the church to be the same for many people. People doing business just come and meet there, and also the coloration, the warmth and the materiality of all of that was part of the inspiration. Any other thoughts about the ideas?
Now you can see, as you'll see some of the original the actual pictures, I think, in a minute, but Scott and his team took the concept of color and really did some really unique things with it, and stretched our imagination and did a fabulous job with it.
So what you're seeing, this is a rendering of the exterior of the building, trying to break down the mass. It was kind of a large monochromatic white, kind of dark gray or light gray box. And so we wanted to put a little life and energy and again, back to that warmth and appeal, but keep the basic bones of the building intact. Spend the money where you could get the most bang for your buck. And so it was mostly with color. And there were neon tubes that were running all over this building. We had to take all those down and patch them up, and we had to patch up all of the old signage positions, but really just kind of through landscaping and color and a little bit of architectural lighting enhance the existing bones of the building. And to do most of the work on the interior, which this shot is that upper concourse space, so try to clean it up. There's the bridge that Gary was describing. It actually was the old projection booth mezzanine. And so we even kept that in place, exposed it to that common area, and it's become a place for musicians, just people watching and preaching and various.
And it's how you get to the skyboxes. We did kind of a stadium thing in the auditorium as they designed it. And so you can go from the offices on the left side, you can go across that bridge that takes you up to the top and the back of the auditorium. So, and it actually is really beneficial. For example, we have a lady that recently died of cancer, and she was so weak, she just had a tough time getting around, so she could walk right in the building, up the elevator to that bridge, go across, sit in the back, and if she started feeling bad, she could slip out very easily. So it's worked out beautifully in that way.
And they actually added 15,000 square feet of office space in the upper levels, volumes of the theaters. And that was one of the big dilemmas of moving over there, is because we were moving out of 125,000 square feet into 125,000, and we weren't quite sure where to put the offices. And then we came up with this idea of putting offices up in the upper part, and it
Yeah, it was
gave
found-
us
found space in
fantastic
the movie
offices
theater.
together.
Right.
The idea was not to, when people walk in, that the idea is not that what they see first is offices, but what they see first is ministry space. So the offices are on the third floor.
The other sketch here was the idea about how to create this one large worship room, and the idea of taking 3 of the auditoriums, which we initially thought would be a no-brainer. We'll just use the slope that's in there and it'll be great, and we'll just take the wall out and it'll be fine. Well, our structural engineer looked at it and he said, not quite as easy. You're going to need to reinforce this and reinforce that and rebuild this part and that part. So the most complex thing about this whole project was creating this room. And you can see a large truss that had to be built. We drew this so that everybody would completely understand what became so expensive so quickly. But that the idea of the space could be realized. This shows you the lower floor. So the beige color here is that existing common space. We didn't really change or manipulate this significantly at all. We kind of changed a few of the storefront locations, but kept all of that intact. Reused the escalators and the stair in their original locations. All of the door openings where they were. It was handicap accessible, and so it fit real easy as a move-in. You just kind of kept the common area space the way it needed to be. And then really the trick was to create some interesting spaces for the different ministries. And so the idea of families coming to church, dropping off their children in their various groups, and then going up to worship, and then that process being reversed as you left, kind of flowed real well, just like a movie theater. If you went in, bought your ticket, went upstairs, saw the movie, and then kind of exited the same way. So the flow of this building worked really well for that.
It actually had 2 escalators, an up and a down escalator, so it didn't make going to the second level very difficult.
Yeah, well, great. So the way we organized it is we put the nursery, the young little kids, the tigers and the zebras and the giraffes, all of them together in here with a common worship space for them. It's, I guess, a little puppet show area, and it's a great little, the ark, very cute. And the ark kind of was inspired by the shape that we ended up with when we were done fitting in all of the different rooms. And these are just classroom-sized rooms with changing tables and various counters for all of the different things that need to occur in those rooms. We have, and then the kids area, which you want to talk a little bit about the kids space and the idea of the stage and the worship room, what that was all about.
Well, from the beginning, the idea was the temple courts and house to house. The idea that small group gathering, large group gathering, and the idea is to have that throughout from the very beginning. So the treetop on both the nursery side, which is an ark where the kids can gather as a big group, and then go into their little breakouts rooms. Do the same thing on the other side there where it says kids. That's a treetop theater. They did a phenomenal job building this space out, and the kids just absolutely love it. They come into treetop theater and they have their large group gathering, and then they do their breakouts. So that's to prepare them for what the overall philosophy of the church is, which most of us, especially in the city, you're doing, rather than trying to get people to come back more than one time a week. You're out in different places doing the house to house kind of stuff. So it's worked out real well that way. We, fortunately, because of what we did, we grew quickly with a lot of young families that had little children. So where you see adult in the blue down there, we had to quickly abandon that, and that is now infants, because we were starting to get so many infants that now that's all called new creations. It's just all infant and toddler space.
Mm-hmm. And then the space that Gary said used to be run by a Dallas Cowboy, this used to be a restaurant here. It was Drew Pearson's 88 or something like that. And so, the idea of repurposing this space for some mission goal-oriented activity was interesting. You want to tell a little bit about that?
Well, because we wanted to bless the neighborhood, and we had so many refugees, we decided to do a culinary school. So we have a good kitchen there, and
Huge kitchen.
And Darla's a master at finding stuff and at good prices. So we put a bunch of commercial type stuff in the kitchen, And then we started a culinary school because we felt like if we could help these refugees, they're invited here by the U.S., they're given 6 months, and after that they're on their own. And I mean, and most of them, some of them have never lived anywhere but a refugee camp, some of them have never seen a flush toilet. So, they may be Bantu Somali, they may be from Myanmar, and so we had this idea for to do the culinary school. In the long run, it didn't work because it was so labor intensive. You tell 2 ladies from the Congo to chop a head of broccoli, and it's an hour because they value the relationship. They're just talking, and we're trying to get them ready to work at a restaurant in Dallas, and and then overcoming a lot of other things related to cultural things was very difficult. So we now have a refugee empowerment program in Vickery Meadow, which now we've got about 120 refugees in that, whereas with the culinary school, we're able to do like 3 at a time. So, and now what we do is we get them into community college, and community college has a culinary school. And so we help them get into community college, understand the process, get them signed up, and we pay their first semester. So we've just found a better way to do it, but it was an interesting concept anyways when we started out.
Yeah, and then the last component was this counseling center, which was run, I recall, as an independent entity.
Mm-hmm. And that's no longer. We now have 4th and 5th graders in there.
Wow. And so then we go to the second floor. The main feature is, of course, the worship room. Well, I'd say the main feature is the grand hall. This space that was created for community and interaction and overflow. I was going back through this, and I've got a number of pictures where all the TV monitors out in the hall if they're just people crowded around them watching the CCTV in the main worship room. So there were 4 theaters on each side, and you can kind of see the makeup. That was a theater. This was a theater, and then this was a theater, and that. So there were 4, and so there was 1 deep on each side. So it was basically a mirror on both sides. And so we combined 2 of the smaller and then 1 of the larger rooms into the worship. And the depth of this 1 theater gave us the stage. And then we added a little bit of square footage to get a token back of house area. Really, you need a whole lot more than that, but it's worked okay. And then, and this is 1,800 seats? 13?
1,100.
1,100 seats. Okay, I'm sorry.
It kept getting smaller as we were ADA requirements.
Right. And then the chapel, the idea behind the chapel was that we would take all of the best seats from all of the theaters, the ones that weren't broken or were stained or anything like that, and we combine them into one chapel space and kind of create something from nothing. That was pretty exciting and fun and real straightforward. And then we converted these other theaters into different classrooms with different configurations, multi-purpose. And then the youth room has a stage up at one end, and then a tier. Because of the slope in the theaters, we tiered that space so that there are different levels, which makes that space even greater. There's lots of different activity and energy in different parts of the room, and then this is kind of an expansion of that, more multi-purpose for the youth. And then above the theaters on the west side of the campus, we inserted this administrative mezzanine. So literally, it's within the space of the original theater. Those theaters were anywhere from 35 to 45 feet tall, and so we were able to put a conventional office height 8-foot ceiling within that space. And it was pretty straightforward. We didn't have any super major retrofit of structure or anything like that. We were able to kind of just fit that in. And then the upper space that Gary described, this is the bridge. This was the original projection mezzanine. And so we kept that intact, and it connects the upper tier of this worship room to make it ADA accessible for our upper level viewers. And so these are some actual shots of the space that after it was completed. You can see we kept the chevron, we kind of fixed that up, put lots of light on it, made it glow. It's basically a lantern, drawing people in. Great views out, great views in. You can see lots of activity. The marquee, we just kind of kept simple. We put some new doors and things like that had been worn out, but the renovation was pretty straightforward. And then the interior space, we introduced lots of warm colors and a little bit of sparkle, a little bit of energy in different locations. We featured lighting and signage. This area here was originally the information area, and it's since already been converted. But you can see the escalators and everything are still in place. So it's a pretty modest use of materials, lay-in ceiling, paint. The fixtures, weren't expensive, but cumulatively, they completely transformed the character of this space. Added some soft seating areas, art program, Darla's Cafe. And then this is a view into the preschool area. So there was a commonality of signage and the treatment of the main floor areas, and then each space was able to tailor it a little bit to each of their character. So you can see the bow of the arc here in the preschool area. And as you can see from the photos, it's where everybody mixes. And then this is a shot into the elementary center. This is a little play area. This is the main entrance into that space. And then this is kind of a murky shot, but this is the treetop stage. Do they still call it the dog pound or whatever? On the side? And then the fellowship hall. Can you talk a little bit about what this space is used for?
Well, we have an 8:15 service in there. It's a very small service. My passion is mentoring delusionally confident young men that want to be pastors. And so I give them opportunities to preach at an 8:15 service because the service is only about 40 people. And we meet in here. And just had a memorial service in there earlier today. We do a number of things there. We've had dinners in there. And we found when we did the demo that the ceiling was octagonal and it had kind of a nice ceiling to it if we captured it that way, and so it turned out looking very nice. We still have some challenges with the sound and with the light in there, but it's still a great space for
Wedding reception.
all sorts of receptions and banquets and those. You can get about, what do you think, Darla, 200 in there seated, I think.
At round tables, yeah.
At round
Probably
tables,
more than
yeah.
that, just at regular seating.
And it was great. It was just kind of found space. It was repurposed.
Some people wanted to keep it a sports bar because it's just Dallas. They want to come right from church down and watch the Cowboys. Right?
That's great. This is a shot of that youth room. So the stage is to the right in the screen, and then different activities, and you can see a railing to the left. So the tiering really works for just creating some energy in the room. And then the chapel. Real straightforward movie theater. The screen can drop down there, and there was a study about doing baptisms in here and things. And so it's just
They've since renovated that.
Yeah, if you look at that, you can tell. I mean, one of the things that we wanted to do, and we were obviously trying to save money, so like Scott said, we kept the best of those theater seats, but it didn't take long before they weren't very good, and we wanted to do more weddings in there. So we've since redone all of that. It's still the same space. That's the only space that's still the original footprint space of what the theater was when it was there, but we've now done some things that we put steps down at the front with carpet on it so that you can do weddings, and it's been used more for weddings than it was before.
And then this is the grand hall space. So we added a skylight in the center of the room to balance out the light that's coming in. That bay window that you saw is at each end of this concourse. So there's lots of natural light that's coming in, and we inserted the skylight in the center to just bathe this space in natural light. And all of the access points and egress points from all the upper level feed into this upper level space. So there's lots of community interaction, lots of activity, and I don't. What kind of functions do you have up here besides just
We
worship?
actually have a lot of wedding receptions we call that the concourse, and so they'll go into the chapel and have the service that you just saw, the chapel, and then they'll have their reception out on the concourse.
We'll rent the
area.
facility to conferences like
Yeah.
this, and they'll have their booths all set up out there. They've had weddings even out there on small weddings and things. And
Parkland Hospital just they rented our facility and did a big annual conference where they put booths up all around the perimeter there and have exhibits and that sort of thing.
That's great. Another shot. There's the bridge that Gary was describing, and literally this was just kind of encased with sheetrock And we found it and opened it up and tried to feature something that others might have just kind of viewed as a demolition opportunity. We tried to find lots of those opportunities when we were here. Real simple, again, back to the graphics, nice palette of colors, but kind of featuring entrances and things like that. And then this is the worship space that was created when we removed the walls in between. And so the slope is still a low rise, a low rising slope. So it's not a stadium seating, but it's a low rise sloped floor, and views to the stage are pretty good.
You might have George talk about that, what we had to use instead of a catwalk.
Yeah, as we
Especially
were
from this.
talking around, I was thinking through, I guess, the things that stick out about this to me, more on the technical side. There's also some things on the building side that are interesting at some point, but that they did not have enough space above the ceiling to have a traditional catwalk, and so it was going to be very difficult to get access to the stage for the guys to set and do their creative theatrical elements. So in this particular time, we used what's called a tension grid that basically spans, you can't really see it, but it's up in there where you actually walk across. Looks like the nets they use in circus, basically, that the people fall into if they really mess up, or they intend to. But anyway, that's kind of what's tensioned across there, and actually the light shine through it. And so it was a real creative way to get a lot of bang without having to do a lot of demolition and costly steel thing to build a steel catwalk up in there. And we simply didn't have the space. The floors during the process, the way soundproofing had to be done, everything kind of started collapsing and getting much narrower to try to get some isolation between the spaces.
And the stage itself, you can see there's not much stage. So
Yeah.
since that picture was taken, we've moved those two big screens outside of the stage area. And then we've put two monitors on the stage so that people that are up close look at the monitors. People that are farther back look at the big screens, but they're farther out, and it created quite a bit more stage space that we were trying to do.
The building was already built to attenuate any sound from the outside, and so just because it was a movie theater. So we were kind of way ahead on some things. I'm sure you did a lot of batting and...
Way behind on other things, yeah, to get isolation between the spaces. But I think even though this building's been in use, and it's good to hear you guys have grown and flexed and moved, the most interesting part of this building to me is I was sitting and reflecting back on it, and history, after you do something for a while and you get a time to kind of reflect back into it, I guess you get new revelations. And I think one of the most interesting revelations about this space is when you guys did the retrofit of this, the traditional way to do it was ground up construction. And the interesting thing is you guys went, time out, let's reuse a space. And I think that is so apropos to what we need to do now. There is so much real estate out there that can be used in a meaningful way. That's a B or a C grade space. All of a sudden, like you guys have done, have come in there and filled that back in. That I think in a lot of ways it was visionary. And I'm not saying that because you're sitting here that, wow, we should have probably been doing that even when the big building boom was going on.
So much money to be saved.
Right, exactly. The money's saved now, and now it's hard to get cash, and it
Well,
just makes perfect sense.
I've seen it
So,
done with, not just theaters or
Right.
things that are obvious, but like even car dealerships.
Yeah.
Because car dealerships for a while there were building some pretty grandiose buildings.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they all went away, as we know with the whole GM deal. And they've come in and done it on those types of properties, which they also have quite a bit of land with parking. So you can kind of look around your neighborhood and look beyond what it is and see what it could be.
Yeah, you've seen lots of grocery stores. We've had mall developers thinking about, well, maybe we could anchor a mall with a church. They're trying to think of kind of new, different ways of thinking about how you can apply a church use.
I would say it's a tribute too, though, to Scott and Omniplan and to Darla as the project manager, how they had the same mindset about this space. That helped tremendously. So Darla led the way early on with staff and said, what do we really need as a staff? What is it we're trying to accomplish? And had multiple meetings and from every staff person. And there was some wrestling back and forth about a certain part of the space. But then once she went to Scott, they were trying to, and I would say, to this day, I'm surprised, because I thought, sure, once we got in there, because I've built a couple, I've been in a couple homes where you get it built and you go, man, I wish we would have done this, and I wish we'd have done that. There's not been any of that with this. There's been some minor transformations just based on where the ministry's gone, but overall, it just was a remarkable process, and we're grateful to Scott and Omniplan and what Darla did, they worked beautifully together.
Yeah, Darla understood the vision. We kind of pushed her there for a little bit, some crazy ideas, and we convinced her that spending a
I was
little
also the
bit more
church
money was a good
administrator, so I was
idea.
over the financial section. So right after we closed the deal, all of a sudden his vision doubled the price of the budget, and I got real anxious real quick. I thought, I'm going to bankrupt the church with this vision real quickly. But fortunately, Gary came into the picture and was saying, nah, don't worry about it. We can handle that. So I said, okay, if you're not going to worry about it, I'm not going to worry about it. Let's build it.
This is just an interesting shot. It shows how the auditorium this auditorium was created. So this was actually an intermediate shot. These were the original columns that separated these theaters. So this was a theater here, and this was a theater space here, and there were columns in between, and we came in and built this truss in between them, and then they cut these columns out. That was an exciting day.
It was
And then this is
undertaking.
And then this is just kind of showing some thoughts about the master plan. So the original building is here, that parking garage that we talked about, and then this is all just a surface parking space. So there's thoughts about, as the church continues to grow and have different needs, that there's the potential to add outward. And so if anyone has any questions or would like to address the panel, and I'm going to try and get a video going here. Yes?
It struck me when you showed the area of the seating that these theaters would have been rectilinear slope floor, but you have fan-shaped seating. Did you feather in concrete or?
Great question.
Real good question.
Yeah, that was one of those things we thought, no brainer, this is going to be so simple. And when we started laying it out and these guys started looking at it, they were challenging whether that would actually work. So we had to create an interstitial airspace and pour a brand new slab on top of it, which complicated the structure, of course. And we also came to find out that the original code, structural code and zoning, building code had, but you couldn't grandfather that, so we had to upgrade the building once we touched it, and so we had to pour a whole new slab that worked with that bowl shape.
We also assumed that the slope of all the theaters that lined up would be the same slope, and because the larger one that was the massive part of the worship center had a totally different slope than the ones on either side, so they all had to be brought to the same slope level. That was a pretty big deal. Then when you put that weight on it, then you had to go and support all
Are you
that
an architect? Yeah, you take an architect.
weight. Okay.
A lot of realizations.
Yeah.
Yes.
So with acquisition and construction, it was about a $20 million project. How did that compare to the building that you had designed but never built? If you started to price out that building, what was the cost difference?
Guys, you're really pressing my memory here. Well, that building on square footage. I mean, at that time, we were estimating to do a worship center is primarily all we were going to do at that time, because we had the existing children's space, which wasn't good space, but it was usable. But it was $225 to $250 a square foot for a worship center at that time.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking we had at least 10,000 square feet or so in that building.
I don't recall.
It's hard for me to remember, but
Wasn't there also an issue with
the biggest
parking?
downside was we were only on 3 acres. We were going to be taking up some of our parking space. And then the other problem is that you have this brand new great worship center, and then you've got these 2 older buildings that were not ideal at all. They had small bathrooms, real narrow hallways. Because they were built in the 70s, if you remember back in the 70s, they didn't have really very unique architecture. And they had wood trusses in between the floors, so we couldn't do a whole lot with putting things on the upper floors. And so really to put that investment in that property, that was the thing I was troubled with, because my background was in real estate, and I knew that, gosh, to go put a lot more money in these buildings does not make a lot of sense. But the idea of tearing them down, that we had 70,000 square feet in those buildings, you start tearing them down and building them back at $100 a foot, they're $7 million, so.
Yes.
Did I hear that you have a parking structure that's a part of the complex?
Yes.
So some of that space is covered, and what is that like when people are leaving church, having those cars exit out of the structure?
It's really not problematic. In fact, a lot of people don't even choose to use the parking structure because we have so much surface
Very
parking.
few people use it. They use the first 2 levels. There's 4 levels.
They don't
about
even
it.
use the upper levels. Now, if, as the church grows or the density becomes an issue, you certainly could. But
I
really
know
hasn't
that
been a
the
factor.
arts team would build props out on that 3rd level of the deck because it was covered, it was kind of right outside the
Actually, it was not connected at all to the building originally, and one of the things we did, it was very simple. We just built a bridge to the 3rd parking level into the back of the green room, which is behind the stage. So it made it very simple to load in and load out from there.
Yes.
So that we can kind of couple ends and means, could you just briefly say what your annual church budget is, how many full-time staff you have, and who in the world did you sell your former church to?
We got 4.5 million is our annual budget.
Who bought the property?
We have 35 full-time staff and maybe another 15 or 16 part-time staff. And Darla knows the name of the people we sold
Well,
to.
actually, what was really interesting is we were trying to sell it to another church that really wanted it, and that fell through. And then a member of the church who was looking for property in the area, he was a medical architecture. And the particular area of town where we're at, we sit between 2 major hospitals. And so he was looking for land to buy, and he was going to convert it back to medical office use. And ironically, though, he bought it from us, and before he could actually get that built, somebody came along and offered him so much money to put an acute care hospital on the back of that property. So they sold it, and they're now officing in a office building down the road. So it was kind of a unique situation that only God could have worked out, I'm sure. So.
Thank you.
But the property did also, I will say this, it set on a major highway, so it could have been used for a number of different things. It had the ability to have a high-rise on it. It had the ability to have residential on it, any number of things.
My computer's not going to do this video
That's all right.
justice. It's kind of jumping around.
What he was going to show is there's some footage we did on one of the changes that we made is we had a wonderful newcomer center on the first floor next to the information desk, and then we had a coffee shop. And some things changed. The coffee shop became very difficult. We had specialty coffee, so we had these long lines, and we never really made any money, and it took forever. And somebody sure enough wanted to have a soy skinny latte with foam, and just on Sunday morning it was like, why are we doing this? And so we blew it out, and now what we did is, there was a psychological barrier of people coming into that newcomer center. As beautiful as that room was, I love that room, but it was hard for people to come through the door because it seemed like once I come through the door, there's just something psychological. So see what we've done is we've blown that out, so it's all wide open now. So the design was like an Apple store. So we have all of these tables, plus the other thing it does is I hate announcements in worship service. I hate them. And so what we do now is our simple welcome to people is all the information you need is down at the hub. And so you come down to the hub and you can see the signs on the tables. So whatever you're interested in, you can walk over there and come down and I'll greet you there. And so put a monitor up where they can, and then we have a home point, which Lake Point, we've been working with Lake Point, and they started this idea of home point, of how you can build your faith at home. So we have all sorts of materials in there, and people from our family ministries area that can kind of guide people through that. There's all of our home groups listed.
Yes.
We run about 2,000 on a Sunday morning. Well, that would be about 1,500 adults about 500, 600 kids.
Y'all still bridging the gap?
Hmm?
You're still bridging the gap from one side to the other?
It's amazing, yeah. I mean, we are far more diverse now than we were 7 years ago. And yet, rather than some people have not liked the diversity part of it, but yet others have been drawn to it. And so, yeah, we're very diverse. We have, I mean, the CEO of JCPenney's attends our church, but also people that just got here from, you know, Myanmar. So it's a wonderful combination.
Anyone
One
else?
more
Yes.
question for you. On the first floor in the children's area and especially the infant areas, what about the plumbing? How did you get all the plumbing in, especially the sewage piping? I thought that was interesting.
The whole project was interesting that way. Yeah.
And because there are little toilets in between every one of those rooms.
Yes. Yeah, we just trenched out the slab and put them in.
Okay.
We had similar mechanical issues. The chillers and everything weren't quite set up for what the zoning that we wanted. So we had to really almost gut the entire building and start over. Yes.
But the maintenance, what about the maintenance of, you guys have weddings that are going on, you guys have different events that are happening. How's the structure of that?
You get a really good facilities manager who's sitting right here in the second row, and it takes some coordination. I mean, there's always something going on, and especially because it was Darla's idea from day one that if we could rent this space out, and we even designed it initially, and we don't use it the way we originally designed it because of the need for nursery space. But if we could rent this out to different entities, one of the hardest things to do is to get people to come in your front door. But once they're in, they might come back because now they've been there and they're familiar with it. So we try to do that all the time. Eddie, we've got Parkland Hospital, we've got the geriatric thing or Alzheimer's Association.
We've also kept our full-time custodial staff. We don't rent out or contract out the custodial.
Yeah.
So we keep a full-time custodial staff, but it's not a large custodial staff. But
The biggest
they're
question-
hardworking.
Yeah, the biggest issue seems with the operations people is storage. Architects never provide enough storage.
Yep.
So,
Somebody over here had a
anything
question.
else? Anyone else? Yes.
You have Wednesday evening activities going on tonight, if a guy wanted to go up and take a look around?
You're welcome to come take a look around. I think our student ministry. What's on Wednesday night, Eddie?
There's something going on every night.
Actually, there's something going on every night. So there's always, I mean, I did do tours around the church at any time.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to come by. It's from here. You just go straight up 75 Central Expressway, and you only go up 5 miles probably
Yeah.
past SMU before you get to 635, and we're right off of Park Lane, right across from North Park Mall.
Right behind Bed Bath & Beyond.
We're the Beyond.
Think of that.
Yeah, we're the Beyond.
She knows where that is. Yeah, great.
You'll remember that one and just go right behind it. But there'll always be somebody there on every night of the week, probably.
It was a great project. Enjoyable. Anyone else? All right, well, thank you.